Personal finance for the masses. This is not personal finance for the masses.
Okay, let's see if this card goes through for that $8,000 drink.
Exactly.
Everybody wants to be a part of the in crowd. Everybody wants to look good.
My decision was, I'm not a victim. I'm not going to stay and work someplace where this is a problem.
Normally we don't drink on Queer Money, but because we're talking about a subject that David is rather vanilla on.
Grab a glass of wine because you're listening to Queer Money with the Debt Free Guys. This is the only show helping our community do more and be more by talking about money from the queer perspective.
Hi, this is Debt Free Guys, and this is another episode of Queer Money, where we're bringing you the best in personal finance with, as John has said before, a slightly rainbow hue.
So pretty. Thank you for joining us. On our podcast last week, we talked about who the Debt Free Guys are and what Queer Money is. In that, we shared our story of where we came from. We had $51,000 worth of credit card debt, and we paid that off in 2.5 years. If you want to find out more details about that, go ahead and listen to that podcast or watch that show on our YouTube channel, Debt Free Guys. And but what we want to talk about today is what our why is. We're very often asked, how did we pay off $51,000 worth of credit card debt? That's the money question, right? We've decided in hindsight, ultimately, the biggest trigger to help us pay off our credit card debt was that we figured out what our why is. Up until that point, we were living incongruently to what our goals were, partly because we didn't know what our goals were.
Right.
We were spending frivolously, we were maxing out our credit cards, we didn't know what we were doing, and then we were upset that our life wasn't looking like what we had hoped it would look like.
Yeah.
But we didn't really have a clear picture of what we wanted our lives to look like.
I think we were kind of living an unconscious life.
Yeah,
We were
exactly.
just meandering through life, allowing every whim to basically dictate what we were doing in life.
Right. Somebody had a party we would go to. Somebody was going out to happy hour, we were going there. Somebody was traveling, to another part of the country, we would go with them. We were just following along with what everybody was proposing to us. And then we were upset that we found ourselves living in a basement apartment in our mid-30s, not really the picture perfect life or the goal that, the way we had envisioned our lives looking at that point. So what it came down to was we figured out what our why is. And ever since then, we've been able to pay off our credit card debt, stay out of debt, and achieve other goals that are helping us achieve our long-term goals. And those two goals are, one, we want to have a comfortable retirement. So we've saved significantly since we paid off our credit card debt, and now are well on our way to having the comfortable retirement that we're looking forward to. And then second, we want to travel extensively, especially while we're young, while we can really enjoy it. So those are our two goals. And once we had those two in sight, we were able to achieve everything else. Because the critical piece is you have to have motivation. It provides you focus. If you don't know why you're waking up every morning, then it's hard to wake up every morning. But if you know why you're waking up every morning, you can do it earlier than anybody else is willing to do so.
Right. Yeah, it kind of reminds us, and in prepping for this, we thought a lot about this quote from Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn is a public speaker who John and I really enjoy listening to. And Jim said that when you know what your why is, when you know what you want and you want it bad enough, you will find a way to get it. And, it kind of makes me think about all of the people, everyone who says that they want something, and we did a Monday Money Minute on this about people who say they want and their ability to get what they want, and people who say that they can, and then the people who say that they will, and the difference in progression that people go through. And it really makes me think about really successful people, and you look at them and you know that they must have gone through something. Like, say, for example, an Olympic athlete. I think that, when you think of the Olympics every 4 years, only a few thousand people out of 7 billion, more than 7 billion people, attend this event because they are at the peak of their abilities in their particular sport.
Right.
And we know that doesn't happen by accident.
Right.
What do those people do in their minds, in their habits? What do they do every single day? Let's just take, for example, an Olympic swimmer, Michael Phelps. I mean, he is the pinnacle of swimming in his sport,
Right.
or male swimming. You think about him, and what he must go through, getting up every single morning, eating the right foods,
Jumping in a cold pool.
right? Getting into a pool at 4:30 in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning, and spending 3 hours swimming, and then maybe doing that again in the afternoon.
Sometimes they swim 12,000 yards a day, which is a lot,
Right.
or more sometimes.
Right. So it doesn't happen by accident. And so as Jim said in his quote, when you really know what you want and you want it bad enough, you're going to find a way to make that happen.
Right.
So what did Michael Phelps think when he was younger, when he set his mind to that goal of becoming an Olympic athlete? And not only becoming an Olympic athlete, but becoming a gold medal Olympic athlete.
Yeah.
And then
Many times over.
right now he's considered the best swimmer ever.
Right. You know, I oftentimes think about how many people could go to the Olympics if they made that a goal.
Right.
I mean, how many people have the talent, the underlying talent to qualify for the Olympics or to do anything in particular in life, you know, whether it's, you know, sports or, you know, music or, you know, anything in particular in life.
Right.
But they don't get there because they don't set it as a goal. They don't have the right ambition in place to be able to do that, because it's hard to wake up every morning at 4:30 and sometimes spend more energy in 3 hours before the rest of the world wakes up than most people spend all day.
Right.
You know, that takes a lot of commitment. And not only are they doing that every morning, but they have to do it for 4 years until they get their opportunity to reach their goal. I mean, you only have one opportunity every 4 years to achieve your goal.
Exactly.
You don't, I mean, it's like that Eminem song, you know?
One chance, one
You get
shot.
one chance, one shot, and it is now. So, you know, it's that kind of focus or inspiration that helped us get out of debt. We knew what it would feel like to have paid off our debt. We knew what it would feel like to see our assets increase as opposed to depreciate.
Right.
We knew what it would feel like to be able to live the life that we wanted to live. And we focused on that goal, those goals, in order to help us get through the tough times of having a very restrictive budget, of only spending $75 a week at the grocery store, of saying no to numerous multitude of invitations to parties or to happy hours or to dinners or to travel. I mean, we really had to dial it back. And the only way that we could do that, and we're pretty social creatures. We like going out and having fun with our friends and family.
Right.
So that, you know, was a real culture shock for us. But the only way that we could have achieved that was by focusing on our goal, focusing on having a clear vision of what that was going to look like, and having a clear understanding of what that was going to feel like.
Right. Yeah, I think, you know, one of the things that you say this to me all the time, and I think it comes from 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Focus with the end in mind.
Right.
You know, and I think about someone like Michael Phelps or any athlete. You know that they sat there, closed their eyes, and they pictured themselves standing on that podium. Yeah. They could feel it. They could feel what the emotions that they were going to be going through. They knew what it was going to be like standing there with the crowd cheering. They knew what it was going to be like having the national anthem being played because of them.
Right.
It was because of them. And I know I get emotional when the national anthem
Yeah.
plays.
And I didn't do anything about it.
Right, exactly. You know, I get those emotions. I can't. You know, so as an athlete, I'm sure they go through that same psychology in their minds and in their bodies. And you know, when you see those athletes up there and they're getting ready to get into the pool or they're getting ready to get up onto the block and swim, you can see them going through the motions in their head.
Sometimes they're sitting there with their eyes shut and their arms are moving, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And the basketball player, you know, the NBA, the playoffs were just recently.
Right.
And you can see some of the basketball players sitting on the side.
Wait, you watch sports?
Sideline. Yeah, I watch sports. Sometimes. But they're sitting there and you can see them playing the game in their head. They're visualizing what it is they're going to do to make themselves win so that they can have the glory and reap the rewards of all of those days and mornings and nights of hard work and effort.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
it's restrictive diet. It's getting to bed early. It's waking up early and practicing. It's nonstop practicing. It's not taking off on holidays because it's Christmas or Thanksgiving. It's
Right.
working day in and day out to achieve your goal, and that's what we had to do. I mean, every time we made a mistake, all that did was slow down our progress in paying off our debt, and then thereby thwarting our ability to achieve our other goals.
Right. And for us, it was we saw ourselves, like you said, we saw ourselves. What would our lives look like when we didn't have $51,000 in debt?
Right.
We knew that we were spending about $10,000 a year just paying for that debt to be there, and we thought, what would our lives look like? We wouldn't be living in a basement apartment. We would be going on vacations, going to places all over the world, and being able to pay for that with cash,
Right.
and coming home and not having that buyer's remorse because of the vacation, and so we could see ourselves doing that. And I think that, like you said, that was one of the keys to us solidifying what our why was, because we could picture ourselves. We knew what it would be like to, in our 40s, to be able to say, we have hundreds of thousands of dollars saved for retirement. We know what it's going to be like when we're in our 50s, when we have $1 million, or when we're in our 60s and we have multi-million dollars.
More than that.
we know what it's going to be like because we have pictured what our lives are going to be like.
Right.
You know?
And so that's what this podcast is about today. We want you, however it applies in your life, whether you're paying off credit card debt or you're trying to achieve some other goal, figure out what is your why. Why is that a goal of yours?
Yeah.
How are you going to achieve it? Because just like David said, Jim Rohn's quote, when you know what you want and you want it bad enough, you will find a way to get it.
Right.
And that's the recipe right there.
Right. So when you think back on that time period, and like John said, it wasn't always easy. Granted, we figured out some tools and tricks and things that we could do. We did research and found ways to still have a really fun life. But when you think back to that time period, what did we do during that process of discovering our why?
Well, so I think when we hit a rock bottom, we knew that how we were living wasn't what we wanted, how we wanted to live anymore. That started, I think, a discussion between us
Right.
for 2 or 3 months of figuring out what is it that we want. Why aren't we reaching the level of success that we thought we would have had at that point?
Right.
And so it was a real, peeling back the onion, a real introspective look, a real honest look. We had to, admit some things that we weren't necessarily happy about. But we had lots of discussions and peeling back, and we figured out going to happy hours every weekend wasn't really what we wanted. Buying new clothing every weekend wasn't what we wanted. We didn't.
Well, I think that, sorry to interrupt you, but I think that we wanted those things, but we were going about getting them the wrong way. We were
not to the
putting
detriment
those,
of our long-term goals.
Right.
So, and that's why we have that quote that we probably have shared on 10 podcasts now. But do we want a margarita here at this bar in Denver, or do we want a margarita in Puerto Vallarta on the beach?
Right,
And
exactly.
by and large, it's always on the beach. And it's not that we can't have any drinks in Denver or we can't have any fun in Denver. It's just we all have some limitations. And we have to understand what our limitations are so that we can manage them and reach our long-term goals. And if our long-term goal is to drink a margarita in Puerto Vallarta, then we need to remember sometimes we have to leave happy hour a little bit earlier, or we don't go out at all, or we have to save a little bit more aggressively, whatever the case may be. So yeah, we did want those things, you're right. It wasn't that we didn't want them. It's just that we were not, like we said earlier, not living congruent to what our goals were.
Right.
And we were putting too much focus on the things that we didn't necessarily want, and not enough focus on the things that we did want. I mean, I think a good example is when we were after we paid off our debt, we started looking for a home to buy. We wanted to move out of the basement apartment. And we were working with a real estate agent, and we had learned our lesson the hard way. We didn't want to overextend ourselves, and we knew that our goal was retirement and travel. It wasn't having a large house. It wasn't having a gigantic yard to maintain every weekend. We didn't want that kind of a lifestyle.
John's allergic to mowing the lawn.
we wanted to live simply when we were in Denver, and our real estate agent kept saying you can afford 3 and 4 times the places that we're looking for. The cost of the places that we're currently looking at, and we knew that we could, but then we would be house poor and we wouldn't be able to save as much for retirement as we wanted to and as we have, and we wouldn't be able to travel as extensively as we wanted to and as we have.
Right.
And we bought a home. What was it? 1.5 times our combined income.
Right, exactly.
Which is almost unheard of, especially in 2008 when people were buying bigger and bigger and more expensive homes. We bought only 1.5 times our income, and because of that, we have been able to save aggressively for retirement. We have traveled to London and Spain, Australia, New Zealand, Mexico several times, and all
Right.
throughout the United States.
Right.
And that's because we didn't buy a home 3 and 4 times our income, which seems to be traditional right now.
Right. I think one of the things you're getting at, and this is very easy, we still struggle with this on a regular basis, is it's so easy to get distracted with what's going on today.
Yeah.
That will distract you from your why, But because we kept our why in front of us, we kept on thinking to ourselves, what major decisions are we making right now, and how should those decisions be made based on our why?
Right. Well, and I think it's also important to know we're lucky that we have the same why.
Right. Yeah, we are.
But, our why isn't necessarily the neighbor's why.
Exactly.
Our why may not even be our best friend's why.
Yeah.
Right? We all have our own whys, and we shouldn't get wrapped up into thinking that just because the neighbor next door or our best friend or our sister or whomever has a particular goal, that we should also have that goal. I think it's, a car analogy I think is pretty good. Somebody in the neighborhood buys a brand new car, I don't know cars, a fancy BMW
or a Porsche.
or a Porsche, right? And then all of a sudden, we've talked about this in previous podcasts. Very often, other neighbors will start to try to upgrade their car. If they don't necessarily even get the Porsche, they'll try to upgrade anyway, so they won't feel slighted at all. But is everybody's goal to have the fanciest car that they can have? I mean, I'm sure it's a popular goal, but is that everybody's goal?
Right.
And for me, I've always wanted a Mini Cooper, and we bought a Mini Cooper, and we paid it off. And David said to me after we paid it off, he said, well, do you want to look at buying a new car? And I said, well, no, this is the car. I would probably just buy this one again.
Right. Yeah,
Right? So
exactly.
I'm not a car lover. I found what I like, and I'm going to stick with it. And my plan is to keep that, our entire lives. But just because you have a passion for cars doesn't necessarily mean that I have a passion for cars.
Right. Yeah, right. I think that whole idea of somebody in the neighborhood gets a Porsche, well, we don't know that there isn't a very unique why behind why they want that car.
Right.
Maybe growing up, that was a car that their dad had, or it was for them. It was a certain level of achievement. I want this because it's going to give me a certain level of achievement. They may have a very specific why attached to it. So just because it's their why doesn't mean it needs to be my why.
Right. So not only is it critical for us to figure out what our why is, but we have to make sure that it's ours and not everyone else's.
Right.
So during the time that Dave and I were paying off our debt, and we were trying to figure out what our whys were. We did a couple of exercises. We talked extensively. We talked with each other mostly, but we talked with friends and family, trying to get some insight and to really kind of, sometimes your friends know you better than you know yourself, and so that that was very helpful
Right.
at times. We also did a lot of meditating.
Right.
So something that we did very often was, it's very easy to turn the radio on in the car when you drive home from work, and that's can distract you from what it is you really should be thinking about. So very often we would turn the radio off and really think about trying to get inside our own head of what it is that we wanted. Another way to do that, you can also meditate in the morning or night and really do some soul searching to figure out what it is you want. Other things that we did was we journaled a lot. We were writing things down. What are we frustrated with in our lives? What is it we wanted to achieve? We would kind of write those down, talk about them, and then cross and add to them as we needed to.
Right. Going back to that analogy of the Olympic swimmer and getting up every morning at 4:30 and getting in the pool and going through these various motions that would constantly make them think about what their goal is, that standing on that podium in the gold medal spot. That's, and that was kind of what John and I were doing, is we were putting up all sorts of things that we would be our reminders of what our goal is. Our goal is to be able to travel. I remember when we were living in the basement, we had a picture of a postcard from Mykonos, Greece, and we had it hanging up there as a reminder to ourselves, this is why we're doing what we're doing. When somebody calls and says, hey, let's go do brunch on Sunday, and we knew that it would turn into a all day thing, and where we could potentially spend hundreds of dollars,
yeah.
we would look at that picture and say, thank you, we appreciate that, but maybe we'll do brunch at our house next time.
Right.
And we wouldn't end the fun, but we figured out ways to
not so expensive ways to have to maintain the fun, but
exactly.
not spend our entire budget.
Yeah, exactly. So we use those tools, and we hope that in part the reason why you're listening to Queer Money is you're looking for tools and tips that will allow you to use your money better, or as we say, do more and be more with your money. Well, these are some things that worked for us. We hope to pass them on to you and encourage you to try them as well. One of the things that we would love is if you do come, or when you do come up with your why, or if you already have your why, please share it with us on the show notes for this podcast, or you can
Whatever
put it
platform
on,
you're watching this on.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Tweet us what your why is. Put it on our Free Guys Facebook wall, or if you're part of our Queer Money Facebook group, please tell us what your why is.
Yeah, I think please definitely share that, because I think it's inspiring. Even though we don't all have the same why, it's inspiring to see what other people's whys are and how they're working towards those. Because sometimes we can maybe get some nuggets of wisdom that can help us work towards whatever our goals are.
Right.
And and when successful people band together, they create more successful people. It's just kind of it's a very symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
It kind of compounds on each other.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that that we also share is in these tips and tricks is to focus on the things that really bring us enjoyment in life. Now, I think that's why John and I focused on travel, because that's something that we could have really close to us on a regular basis. Retirement is a long ways off, but with the travel, we were able to say what really makes me happy, what is bringing me happiness. And as we mentioned earlier, happiness is unique to you.
Right.
It's very unique to you. So we encourage you to think about what really brings you enjoyment in life, because as that quote from Jim Rohn said, if you want it and you want it bad enough, then you're going to figure out a way to do it. You think about the little kid, the conniving little kid who's going to figure out how he can get what he wants, and goes and asks Dad, and Dad says no. Well, then he goes and asks Mom, and Mom says yes, and then what do? They go back to Dad and say, or sometimes they'll ask and say, Mom said yes, is it okay
Yeah.
if, so we find those ways in our lives if we figure out what's most important or most valuable or brings us that level of happiness.
Right. So that's what we ask you to do today. Please take some time this week or any time thereafter to figure out what is your why. What is your purpose here? What are you trying to achieve? And then once you know what that why is, or what maybe you have 2 or 3 whys. Once you know what your 2 or 3 big whys are, then you can start to strategically plan to achieve those things. And everything else falls into place. You realize what's not important and what is important. And then when you focus on what's important, you'll eventually achieve what your long-term why is.
Right. And kind of wrapping it back again to that analogy of the Olympic athlete, when they know what it is they want to achieve, they're going to do the things to get there. They're going to start taking those steps to get there. And I think about during the Olympics, when we were watching Michael Phelps, when he was winning race after race, or when he was in the pool and he's swimming, and that last one where he was milliseconds away, we were so excited watching that, just the enthusiasm, and that was affecting millions of people around the country. Well, the same thing is with us achieving our whys. The enthusiasm that we can have. I mean, people knew when we had paid off our debt. They knew that we had finally paid off. We were sharing it with people. We were so excited, and they were excited for us. And then we started doing things because of that. Traveling or buying our condo. All of that was all a part of that, and a lot of people were excited. So we want you to have that excitement as well. It's amazing to achieve your end goals.
Absolutely. So this week, figure out what your why is and start strategically planning to achieve that why.
Right. Remember to share it with us.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. We just serviced you. Now you get to service us by subscribing to this podcast on iTunes and signing up for the Queer Money Lifestyle newsletter at queer.money.
Well, I'm not really gay.
Would help me if I had a personal chef made all my healthy meals for me. Right. So instead, I'll have a Snickers tonight for dinner.
The other end, I like the butts. So.